Hey, Frog fans, welcome in. Jamie Plunkett here. Melissa Treebwasser will be along shortly. Welcome in to another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. Very excited for this episode. Melissa does it again with a fantastic guest. Ryan Monceaux from GoCougs.com will be along with her to break down TCU versus Houston, kicking off at 6:30 on a Friday night on ESPN. A Friday night football game, something that TCU fans hoped to leave behind in the Mountain West 10, 11, 12 years ago now. But alas, here we are. Because of the Big 12's new TV deals, because of the new way that things are being scheduled, we're seeing games more in the middle of the week. We're seeing games later at night. I believe Tech and Arizona don't kick off till 10 p.m. Central this weekend on Saturday. Brutal for Red Raider fans. Almost feel bad for them. But hey, excited for the podcast tonight. Got a great show. Like I said, Melissa and Ryan Monceaux will break down everything TCU Houston here in just a moment, and I'll be answering some questions from HornFrogBlitz.com. Always a risk. I haven't read them. We're going to just dive right in all raw into that Q&A mailbag. We'll see how it goes. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about the Flying T Club, our presenting sponsor here on the show. The Flying T Club is TCU's NIL collective. They are TCU's only NIL collective. They support over 110 student athletes. They partner with a variety of organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth. They partner the student athletes with the organizations with the university. They do a lot to promote the well-being of the city of Fort Worth and the well-being of TCU student athletes. If you go to flyingtclub.com, you can see all the work they're doing, the students that they sponsor, and you can see the variety of different ways that you can get involved. They love working with fans of TCU. And they want you to be a part of the Flying T Club as well. So, flyingtclub.com, see how you can get involved, support TCU student athletes, and connect with some excellent first-class organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth. I can't stress, obviously it's great that TCU students are getting the financial support that they get from the Flying T Club. But one of the things that makes Flying T so unique, and one of the few nonprofit organizations in the NIL space, is the work they do with these organizations. Very cool, excellent organizations that you want to be involved with. So, flyingtclub.com, it's not just about giving money, although that is important and one of their requests if you want to get involved, but you'll learn more about some of the organizations that are doing great work in our city. Can't ask for much more than that. FlyingTClub.com, go and check them out. This podcast is also a part of the Republic of Football Network by Dave Campbell's Texas Football. If you are looking for a podcast feed that has not just TCU information, but podcasts on every D1 football program in the state of Texas, which is currently 13, based on some realignment news, could be 14 soon. Shout out to Tarleton State. All in one feed. 13 podcasts about 13 D1 football programs in the state of Texas, all in one feed on the Republic of Football Network. Search that up wherever you get your podcasts, and all of that information, all of those shows will be right there at your fingertips. Make sure you like and subscribe. If that feels overwhelming, okay. If you don't want Texas Tech information, I understand. Hey, you can just get the Frogs Insider Show, just our feed, wherever you get your podcasts. All you've got to do is search Frogs Insider. Our show will pop up. Hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, share it with a friend, do all the things, make sure the show keeps growing. Everybody do their part now. And you can go over to the YouTube channel, hit the follow button, subscribe button, whatever it's called, like the video, and leave a comment underneath to let us know that you're there, because we do want to grow that YouTube channel. We're closing in on 700 subscribers really quickly. When we get to 1,000, if you've missed the last episode, Melissa and I are going to be picking challenges for each other to do when we hit 1,000 subscribers. She said that if we hit 1,000 by Halloween, she will put out a Twitter poll and let the fans decide what my challenge is. So if you want to choose my pain and suffering, hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel and get us to 1,000 subscribers by Halloween. I've got something for her as well, but she wanted to leave it to the people. Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate you. When it comes to my challenge for 1,000 subscribers. And we might do something else fun as well, more geared towards y'all, our incredible listenership that is growing by the day. I got an incredible message earlier this week, super thankful, that just said, hey, love the show, keep doing what you're doing. And honestly, that means a ton, because Melissa and I wouldn't be doing the show, we wouldn't have been working on TCU content together for the last decade plus if nobody was watching it or listening to it or reading it. So we're super thankful for everyone that's been along for this journey, especially with the Frogs Insider podcast, because we've got some really good momentum right now. And so let's keep it all rolling. Okay, that's enough of podcast business and self-promotion. Let's talk TCU and Houston. I am very excited about this football game for a couple of reasons. And before we get into Melissa and Ryan's preview, I wanted to go over to a little website called NCAAinsiders.com, where we can see some of the more advanced stats analysis of this game, because I know what you're thinking. Houston's 1-4. They've been shut out in 2 straight games. This should be a cakewalk for TCU. If it's not, that's a disappointment. I've seen it all on Horned Frog Blitz. I've seen it all over Twitter at this point, and there is some validity to that sentiment. I'm not going to totally dismiss that. But taking a look at some of the advanced stats, some of the deeper data, will give us a better picture of what this actually could look like from a football game perspective. So I'm going to try and do a thing that I haven't done before on the live show. Here we go. If you're watching on the YouTube channel right now, holy crap, it worked out of the gate. I'm a genius. Like and subscribe. Okay, so this is NCAAinsiders.com, also known as collegefootballinsiders.com, and they provide incredible data powered by CFB graphs that gives us kind of a deep dive into what this matchup can look like. Generally speaking, blue is good. The darker the blue, the better. Red is not as good. The darker the red, the worse. So there's your scale from a color perspective. Let's jump in a little bit. Here in the center of the screen, what you'll see excuse me, is Houston's offense versus TCU defense in the top section, and Houston's defense versus TCU's offense in the bottom section. So all of the red in that top middle square is Houston's offense versus TCU's defense. We know that those units have not been very good this year, although TCU's defense did take a decent step forward against Kansas last week. TCU is 77th in EPA per rush. That means expected points added per rush. They are 77th in the country. For defense, negative numbers are better. So positive 0.015, 77th best in the country against the run per running down. EPA per dropback, TCU's 89th. They haven't been thrown on much because they've seen a lot of mobile quarterbacks so far, but the times that they have seen balls fly through the air, they haven't defended it terribly well on a per-play basis either, 89th in the country there. They are allowing 4.15 points per Eckel drive, and Eckel drive is any drive that reaches the opponent's 30 with a first down. They are giving up an Eckel drive on 43.9% of their drives. So almost half the drives they're allowing teams into their field, side of the field and across the 30, and on those drives they're giving up over 4 points, which means you're just almost as likely to get a touchdown as you are to kick a field goal. So TCU's defense really struggling so far this season. Fortunately, this is an offense that has not had much success. Houston scored 52 points this year. 33 of those came against Rice. They haven't scored in the last 2 games. You hear my dog barking in the background. He's so disappointed in Houston's defense that he can't stand it, or Houston's offense that he can't stand it. They are 114th in EPA per rush, 96th in EPA per dropback. Those are negative numbers on offense. That's never a good sign when it comes to EPA. They are good at field position. They start around the 25, which is nice, not too shabby. But they're just everything about this offense is bright red and not good. You go to the other side of the football, though, and you see obviously TCU's very good offense, 20th in EPA per dropback in the country, 66th in EPA per rush, an improvement, especially after the Kansas game. 57.6, almost 58% of TCU's drives cross the opponent's 30, and they're averaging over 4 points on those drives, which is really good. They're incredibly, incredibly good. This is a stat that you can pay attention to here. Third and fourth down success, they are fourth in the country. They convert on third and fourth down almost 60% of the time. Incredible, incredible right there. Houston's defense, though, if you'll notice, is also pretty good. They are 39th in the country on EPA per dropback. They've got a good secondary. It hasn't been tested a whole lot so far this year, but it is decent. And they're 78th in EPA per rush defense, right around where TCU's run defense is. So if you try to attack them through the air, you might have less success than if you attack them on the ground. I think that's an interesting matchup to watch in this Houston game, considering TCU's strength is passing, and it appears that Houston's defensive strength is their secondary. So looking forward to this game. I don't have a prediction or anything for you, but I do think TCU wins this football game. But let's go ahead and jump in, because while I can look at advanced stats all day, you guys came to hear from an expert. So let's listen to Melissa Triebwasser as she sits down with Ryan Monceaux from GoCougs.com to talk about this football game. Let's jump into that right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another preview edition of the Frogs Insider Podcast, part of the Dave Campbell's Texas Football Republic of Football Network, brought to you, as always, by our friends at the Flying T Club. I am very happy to be joined today by Ryan Monceaux of GoCougs.com, who is kind enough to drop in for an early week preview because of some obligations that I have this week to talk TCU Houston. We've got to move the schedule up, too, because this is a Friday night tilt in Fort Worth coming up. So, Ryan, really appreciate you taking some time to talk about this game with me.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Well, TCU and Houston, both I think could classify the starts to their season as a little bit disappointing. I don't think either team is particularly happy with where things are going, but have seen signs of life, signs of hope, and reasons to get excited about the direction they're heading. TCU, of course, coming off the win at Kansas at Arrowhead. Houston playing Iowa State really, really tough in the first half, 3-0 at the break. But the tides turned when Willie Fritz, in my opinion, angered the football gods by choosing to punt on fourth down in plus territory. And from there, it seemed like Iowa State kind of took off. What can you tell us about what happened this weekend against the Cyclones, and what type of where you think Houston is emotionally and confidently and confidence-wise heading into Fort Worth on Friday night?
Nowhere.
Good answer. Great preview. Really enjoyed talking to you, Ryan. We'll see you Friday.
The defense has played well for 4 of the 5 games this year. They had a little hiccup at Cincinnati a week ago, but righted the ship against Iowa State. But special teams and offense is just a nightmare. And U of H has done a good job with big plays, but sustaining drives and getting to manageable second and third downs has been a real problem. And I mean, you haven't scored in 127 minutes of game time.
Jeez.
So yeah, you've been shut out 2 weeks in a row. You virtually were shut out in the opener. You had garbage time against third teamers when you scored your only touchdown then. I mean, it's been a rough year. A year ago against TCU, U of H fans were angry because they only scored 1 touchdown in that game. And it turns out that 1 touchdown doesn't sound so bad right now.
Yeah, seriously. Well, and I think, I guess that leads us right into starting with the offense. Like you said, the defense has been tough. They played Oklahoma tough.
Mm-hmm.
They held Iowa State to 20 points. And like I said, just 3 in the first half. But the offensive side of the ball has been inefficient, to put it kindly.
Yes.
Frog fans are certainly familiar with Donovan Smith, who has played in all 5 games, is the quarterback, completing 65% of his passes, but only has less than 700 yards on the season, which is basically a game and a half output for Josh Hoover, and just 2 touchdowns. Donovan, this is his second year at Houston, if I remember correctly, and he's got time at Texas Tech as well. So someone that the Big 12 is very, very familiar with, but hasn't really seen to grow the way that you would expect him to grow. And obviously now this is his 3rd system in 3 years, which probably isn't helping things either.
Right. But he's a 5th-year senior. You've got to expect a lot more than you're getting. The mistakes he made at Texas Tech are still the mistakes he makes today. And I mean, it just there's been no growth. There's probably been regression, to be honest. This is the worst he has looked at U of H. In the Iowa State game, Willie Fritz rotated quarterbacks every single series.
Jeez.
So it was one and the other, and one and the other. And I mean, Willie's coached football or been a head coach for 36 years. He knows a lot more about this than I do. But outside, I would think that, a guy needs more than 3 plays a punt and then go sit on the bench before he can get in a rhythm. And neither guy got in a rhythm yesterday. Zion Chris, who transferred in from Louisiana Lafayette, got the other playing time. Zion did not complete a pass yesterday, or maybe he completed one for 1 yard. So, it was a struggle, and Donovan really his only yards came on a kind of a hurry up drive in the fourth quarter, which ended with him throwing a pick in the end zone. So it just has not been good offense to this point. The running game has started to pick up, but in terms of quarterback play, throwing the ball, it's just not there.
Well, thankfully for you guys, coming to TCU's biggest weakness on defense is absolutely rush defense. They seem to have potentially turned a corner yesterday against Kansas. You talk about guys who have not taken a step forward. Jalen Daniels. We were saying that we feel like I just totally blanked on his name, but the offensive coordinator at Kansas, Todd Grimes or Jeff Grimes, should be put in jail for what he's done to one of the best players in the conference when healthy from a couple of seasons ago. But TCU held Kansas under their season average for rush yards, but still allowed the Jayhawks pick up a lot of yards on the ground. Do you think that Houston is positioned to go with a rush first attack, assuming that they're not playing from behind the whole time? And can they be effective because Donovan Smith has some wheels. Young Chris is, if I remember correctly, a pretty mobile quarterback and is a little bit of a threat with his legs. So might that actually play into Houston's hands and maybe allow them to kind of get out of this offensive slump, or are they too far gone at this point?
Well, I mean, you can always get out of it, but will they allow themselves to do it? It's been disheartening to watch because there doesn't seem to be an overarching plan. Willie made a comment about this a week or two ago of we're running some plays, but we're not putting an offense together. And and last night he even said that, maybe the playbook is too difficult for the players. Maybe we've got too much in there. And it's like, well, I mean, you're not scoring with what you got going on right now. So yeah, maybe there does need to be some change. The problem has been that you get some yards on first down, and then they get creative on second down. But when you do not get those yards, they've lost yards on a third of first down plays this year. When you don't get those yards and you're stuck back behind the chains, you're at 10, 11, 9 yards. They have not been good because they are one-dimensional. And it's been a struggle to watch. The guys that I talked to on the team, they seem frustrated. I don't think there's infighting, but, I don't think it's that far away.
I mean, man, we could go a lot of directions based off of that, and I want to make sure we kind of hit on all of those things. But it's going to be really, I think fascinating to see TCU whose pass defense hasn't been bad, whose rush defense has been absolutely bad, and they haven't been really able to generate negative plays much the last couple of weeks. And you talk about a team that's a third of their first down plays are going for loss. That is an absolutely insane stat.
No gain or loss, but yeah,
or no gain or loss. So that's going to be really interesting to see. And then, like you said, will they stick with a run game that seems to have some potential? I mean, you've got Stacey Sneed is averaging 6 yards a carry. He leads the team with 36 attempts. Rashawn Sanford has 5 yards a carry, and then Chris, when he's in, is averaging over 4 yards a carry as well. Yeah. And so there's certainly some guys that can attack. And if you've watched any film on TCU whatsoever, that's what you're going to want to do as an offensive coordinator. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, though, an area where Houston absolutely has some confidence and has some expectation. TCU's running game has been as bad as their run defense has been, their run offense has been equally as much of a challenge. But yesterday it seemed like, or Saturday, it seems like they finally did start to turn the corner by using Jeremy Payne a little bit more, and Cam Cook seems to finally be comfortable in that role. But prior to yesterday, there was not a guy on the team that was averaging even 4 yards a carry. So how has Houston's run defense been, and where have teams been able to attack in that area with their offensive game plans?
Their run defense has been really solid. The problem that U of H has had is, at least in the Cincinnati game, the only time you've really seen issues is the first tackle, the first guy, and when they miss, there are problems. Just with what we've seen, I think the run defense is pretty good. You've got two linebackers that have been really stout. They were bad against Cincinnati. Um, and then you've got a dog position, which is like the hybrid defensive end, and what they call the anchor, which is kind of a nickel, have been really good in run defense. So there are a lot of opportunities for this U of H team to, at least get TCU into positions where they have to throw the ball, which obviously is where they're going to succeed. And with Dana Holgerson there, they might just abandon the run completely against Houston and just throw it 90 times.
That's another interesting point as well. One of the things that Sonny Dykes talked about after the game against Kansas was the reason that they were successful in the run game is because they didn't abandon the run. I think they had 35 attempts, which might be their high of the season. But previously, we had seen Josh Hoover drop back 45, 50 times pretty regularly in games. And so I don't know if this is the start of something new between Kendall Briles and Sonny Dykes with a commitment to actually attempt to run the ball, or they're just going to say, hey, this is a game where throwing it is the best option, and we're going to see Josh with 60-something attempts, which is also definitely a possibility. And speaking of that, tell me a little bit about the pass rush for the Cougars as well as what the secondary looks like. TCU had, two wide receivers go over 100 yards. Jack Besh is currently leading the conference in receptions and I believe touchdowns as well. And Savion Williams is a guy who looks the part of a potential first or second round NFL wide receiver. So are these guys going to be able to feast against the Cougars, or do you think they can contain them enough to keep this thing interesting?
So the Houston defensive line is pretty undersized. You've lost a lot of guys to pro football the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had a good game yesterday. It may not show up in the stats, but I think they did a really good job of getting in the backfield and being disruptive. U of H is pretty strong at safety, and the cornerbacks, they rotate a lot of guys out, and that's maybe where the inflection point could be, where TCU could take advantage. U of H has not faced anybody that has thrown the ball a lot. UNLV certainly did not. OU did not. Rice does not. Iowa State does not. And so they have not seen an offense like this that's going to try to do it 30, 40, 50 times. And, we'll have to see what they look like against that sort of offense, which they have not seen since last year.
Yeah, that's funny because TCU has also not really played an opposing offense that has wanted to throw the ball 30 plus times yet. And why would you, based on what you've seen defensively from the Horned Frogs. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a contrasting styles, in that this is probably the first team that TCU has played since the opener where the opponent hasn't had to work against what their strength is too much. So that's going to be, I think, another interesting matchup. Josh Hoover has gotten a little turnover prone the last couple of weeks for various reasons. Are we looking at some ball hawks in the defensive secondary for Houston? Is that an area where they could gain an advantage and have a chance to play? I'm going to call it an upset because it's a road game and TCU is favored to win, but it wouldn't be an upset of dramatic proportions. I don't think this is a game that is unwinnable for Houston. Because I don't think any game is unwinnable for an opponent against TCU until they show me some consistency. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, there have not been a lot of ball hawk moments. U of H is probably near the bottom of the country, certainly outside the top 75 in terms of creating turnovers. Only been 3 interceptions this year. Donovan Smith has thrown his fair share. I think he's got 5, typically 1 a game. So it it has not been the case to this point. Um, that's sort of an opportunity situation. You just haven't seen it.
You know, you mentioned Dana, who is serving as an analyst for TCU, but mostly working with TCU's defense to try to
Defense,
poke
right.
holes, which is fascinating on so many levels. But he'll be familiar with a lot of the players on this
Yeah.
team. But I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily view that this is a big time advantage that it
No.
might be if there had been any crossover. But still, obviously, there'll be some emotions. There'll be a little bit of extra juice, probably, especially from the Houston side. When you look at the transition from, Holgerson, who really brought that program back to a place where it looked like they were set up for sustained success, and then gets into the Big 12, takes his lumps as most teams do, and then is summarily dismissed. I got like 4 hours of sleep because we drove back after the game last night, so I'm more of a wreck than normal. And then Houston goes out and makes what pretty much everybody would consider a home run hire in Willie Fritz. Definitely one of the top candidates available, a guy who is almost universally respected and has a track record of turning programs with potential into programs that can succeed. It's early. It's year one. He obviously has a big rebuild to do of that roster. But what are kind of the early impressions of Willie Fritz at Houston, and do people feel like whatever happens this season, he still can be the guy to elevate, a sleeping giant really in a conference where there is room for a program to jump in and be the flagship program?
Uh, I think reasonable people see that this was not going to be a 1 year thing. This is not a 2 year thing. This is a 3+ year turnaround. And, they brought in 64 new players.
Wow.
And
That
that's, I mean,
many, like half your roster, more than half your roster.
yeah, it was, I think it's number 1, number 2 in FBS, right there with
Colorado?
Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, it was just a huge influx. In the opener, 8 of 11 starters were new this year.
Wow.
So that's kind of where you're at. And so reasonable people will see that and say, okay, he needs another year. We're going to give him time with our patience. Obviously, he's going to get that time, but fans have to accept that part of it. I think he is doing it the right way. He is certainly doing the right things in recruiting, things you haven't seen at U of H in a long time. And if he is given the space and the time, I think he will turn it around. But this is not a 15-foot boat. This is a cruise line basically that
Yeah.
you're trying to turn around, and it's going to take some time.
I think more fascinating than the game this weekend is kind of the long-term implications of what you just mentioned, and that's recruiting. Houston is such an important area for any Texas university to be able to recruit, and I think the nightmare scenario of Houston joining the Big 12 for schools like Tech, Baylor, and TCU was them awakening that sleeping giant and becoming a destination for the kids that grow up in that city. What are some of those things that Willie is doing differently in recruiting? And do you see kind of that big picture of him being able to, as Gary Patterson used to say, build a fence around Houston and keep guys home?
I think there's an authenticity to the guy that you have not seen at U of H in a long time. Um, Through Tom Herman and Major Applewhite and Dana Holgerson, you just did not get that level of authenticity. Uh, Guys rave about him. Guys on the team now, and then recruits. It's going to take some time, but he feels very comfortable in recruiting Houston guys, recruiting South Louisiana guys, going up to Dallas when it's necessary, but also being that place for when guys are unhappy at an FBS school. and want to come back to Houston,
Hmm.
welcoming those guys in. And a lot of that happens in recruiting. You say, okay, we weren't your first choice, but maybe we're going to be your second. And, you know, if you ever get back in that portal, we'll talk to you. And there's a lot of guys on this roster that fit that very scenario. So I think that is a huge thing for U of H.
Sounds like
You're basically,
I
yeah,
was say sounds like Willie Fritz and Sonny Dykes have
yeah.
similarities in being the wayward home for kids that left home and want to come back.
I mean, it's a very obvious thing. I mean, but yeah, the people that are able to convert those guys
Mhm.
are going to be the ones that really win.
Yeah. Well, we also agree with Willie in that we only go to Dallas when it's absolutely necessary. So as a Fort Worth school. So I did just look at the spread as of when we're recording this Sunday late afternoon. It is a 10-point spread. Looking at Houston and their struggles and their getting shut out back-to-back games. Looking at TCU's defensive weaknesses, but how much firepower that offense does have, and they've consistently scored points both in wins and losses. Do you feel like 10 points is fair? Do you expect Houston to be able to cover? Do you think that this could be better than that, worse than that? Where are you landing on almost less than a week out from game day?
Well, I don't do predictions, but 10 sounds awfully low.
I'm
Um,
so sorry, Ryan. I have lived this life, and I just know how hard these days are. Yeah, 10 could be low on a road game on a Friday night.
yeah,
I think that's probably true.
it
Go
weird
ahead.
stuff happens on Friday nights,
Yeah.
and that's a 10 sounds awfully low.
So you don't do predictions, but I'll
No,
ask it to you in this way. For Houston to come out with, I guess by Vegas' standards, would be a significant upset. What do they need to do? What needs to go right for them?
the number one thing is to hold on to the ball. The turnovers have been way too much. Number two is penalties. They don't have a lot of penalties, but they are crushing on third down penalties, on special teams. And I mean, last night there was a U of H fumbled a ball and then got a personal foul
Yeah.
after the play. And so you set Iowa State up at the 30-yard line. And you cannot do that. And it's just Willie Fritz has a mantra that the Cougs don't beat the Cougs, meaning penalties and turnovers and things, but it has not worked out the way he has anticipated it working out. They have been awful in both categories. So you've got to be good in both of those. And this defense has to figure out a way to turn TCU over. And I mean, it's going to take a lot of things, right? You cannot give TCU 13 or 14 possessions. So it's got to be kind of a 8 possession a team kind of game for U of H to really have a chance.
And that would be, I think, absolutely the formula, because TCU is at its best when it is just getting that offense back on the field, and they can operate so quickly when they get in a groove. So that'll be it. But they also, yesterday was the first time we saw that team be able to grind out a drive to finish
Yeah.
a game too. So that had been something that we hadn't really seen. So I think that's going to be Houston trying to kind of grind it out and slow it down versus TCU, especially on offense, wanting to run 100 plays. Should be a really fascinating thing to watch. I think it'll be an entertaining game because TCU has shown that they're just going to make every game probably be a little more entertaining than you would want as a TCU fan. But yeah, I mean, Houston obviously has some growing to do, but I'm glad to hear they're going to give Willie Fritz the time that he needs. Before I let you go, let's end on a happy note now, because when this comes out, it will officially be October. And to me, October means that we are talking hoops, because this is when we really start to get excited. Houston, obviously one of the elite programs in the country right now, certainly likely going to be the preseason pick to win the Big 12 conference. But we've got 4 new schools coming in to join, and another basketball blue blood is one of those in Arizona. When you look at just kind of, Houston obviously lost some great players. They were an older team, I think, last year, but they've got some young guys behind, and Kellen Sampson's obviously recruited at a high level too. What are you kind of your preseason outlook for this team, and how chaotic and insane is Big 12 conference play going to be in hoops this year?
The outlook is fascinating. You have 4 returning starters. You lost Jamal Shed, who
Yeah.
was
Who's
one of
an
the 2 or 3
all
best
world? Yeah.
players in the country, and will have his number up on the wall very soon at U of H. But you have 4 guys that are really elite players, and you're bringing in some talent around them. You brought in a point guard from OU, and they're recruited very, very well. This has a chance to be Kelvin Sampson's best team. I think it would shock me if they stay healthy, this team's not in the Elite Eight or further. Now we're saying that in September,
Sure.
which is pretty easy to do. But I think this is a really, really good team. The thing that could derail this whole thing is a 20-game Big 12 schedule.
Yeah.
And I will be at every game this year, and it's going to be a war. U of H coming down the stretch has to Kansas at home and then goes to Baylor before they go to Kansas City for the conference tournament. The conference tournament is going to be nuts. I think the really, really good teams should just not show up and let the other schools battle for seeding. I mean, Iowa State won it last year, and it didn't help them at all in their seeding. So what's the point? But yeah, I think that it's going to be a nightmare for coaches. It's going to be fantastic for fans and media watching. But twice a week, and a lot of those flips are Saturday to Monday, the big Monday games. U of H, I think, has 4 of those. Those are hard transitions, and a lot of them, most of them, are road to home or home to road, and that's just. It would not surprise me if the winner of this conference has 5 losses in the league.
Yeah, I was going to say I would not be shocked if Houston was like 14-6 in conference play and made the Final Four.
Yeah, you could
not. No one's more battle tested coming into NCAA tournament than Big 12 teams. I mean, that's why we've seen Iowa State make those big runs the last couple seasons. That's why we've seen these teams be able to overcome deficits. Like you are certainly prepared if you survive January and February to make a really good run in March.
Yeah. For sure.
And I'm very disappointed to hear there's 4 starters coming back, because it felt like Houston has been old for 3 years now. I didn't realize they were not the right kind of old for people that have to play them. They're the right kind of old for Kelvin Sampson, not for the opponents. That is so disappointing for the rest of us. Not that I think TCU's basically turned over their entire roster, so I think trying to reach for 500 in conference play is probably the ceiling there, but. It is going to be an absolute blast to watch. And then you add in Arizona. You've got Colorado. Obviously, they lost a couple guys to the draft, but that's a team that's shown that they can make a run in March. This is going to be among the most entertaining seasons of sports I think we have in conference play among any of the sports.
For sure.
Is super exciting and terrifying if you love college basketball or a particular team. Ryan, tell us where people can find your work and see you talking Cougs and get so TCU fans can get ready for what they're going to be facing Friday night.
GoCougs.com is where we do content every day of the week. We'll put out 350 pieces of original content every season. Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah.
We're GoCougs1, numeral 1, on all social media, YouTube, where we have 3 podcasts, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and it's Cougs, OOGS, not OUGS. If you go to Go Cougs with the U, you go to BYU's apparel website. Don't do that.
We don't want to do that.
There's no reason for that.
Although they did just beat Baylor, so we're all like giving them a pat on the back right now. So,
yeah.
Well, Ryan, really appreciate your time, taking some time to get us ready for Friday night. I know you'll be up at the game in Fort Worth. We hope you enjoy the evening. I will be somewhere eating pasta. So sad I won't get to shake your hand in the press box, but I really appreciate you taking some time today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you to Ryan for his time. I appreciate him taking time to sit down with Melissa and break down this football game. TCU against Houston, 6:30 p.m. Friday night on ESPN at the Carter. Do what you got to do. Show up, get there, fill the stadium, make sure that it's a good home environment for the Horned Frogs. Before we jump in, we do have Mailbag for Horned Frog Blitz. From Horned Frog Blitz tonight, I'm going to be answering some questions. Before, though, just a reminder that this show is sponsored by the Flying T Club. Go to theflyingtclub.com. You'll be able to see all of the different ways that you can get involved with TCU's NIL Collective, support TCU student athletes, and organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth. Also, a big shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are a part of the Republic of Football Network. You can find that anywhere you get your podcasts. All you've got to do is search Republic of Football Network. All right, here we go. Question time. I do this a couple times a month over at hornfrogblitz.com. It is for our subscribers over there. If you want to ask a question on the podcast, all you got to do, go to hornfrogblitz.com, hit that subscribe button, and you'll see the mailbag threads when I place them on the website. Yep, didn't back myself into a corner grammatically there at all. So we got a bunch of questions from folks on the site. Going to walk through those really quickly, and then we will get out of here. Frog24 asks, why does Johnny Hodges continually get more playing time than Caleb Elarms, or no clue what the coaches have seen with him over the past year plus? Johnny Hodges is nothing if not a disciplined linebacker. He's going to be where he's supposed to be. He's going to do his job, which is a phrase that I know TCU fans are maybe a little tired of lately. And Caleb Elarms, or while very athletic and capable, hasn't been in the system as long and hasn't been at TCU as long. And so maybe there's still some growing pains there. I know that I liked what I saw from both of those linebackers in fall camp. I've liked what I've seen from both of them at times on the field. And so I think it's just a matter of, one guy's been here. He's a veteran leader. He's consistently where he needs to be. And the other guy is still growing into the role. There's nothing wrong with that. Is there going to come a point in time this year where their snap count flips and they kind of cross paths with each other? Maybe. But let's be honest, we haven't seen much from this defense to warrant anything at this point. They've started to make some changes. We saw a couple more linebackers get some run against Kansas because Nnamdi Obiezor was banged up. The linebackers played well, but they also still made a bunch of mistakes. And so I don't know that there's necessarily, you see JT Broughton struggle, Channing Canada comes in, he'll probably get more run. You see the running game struggle, Jeremy Payne comes in, he has success, he's going to get more run. You make some changes along the offensive and defensive lines, there's a little bit more success, those guys are going to get more run. Linebacker is coming, right? Linebacker is coming. It's going to be the same situation, but Johnny Hodges is a capable linebacker, and he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. Frog Cornuda, what is genuinely wrong with Paul Oyewale? And if he's going to miss most of the season, has the staff considered a medical redshirt? I'm going to say this. This is so two parts to this question. Let's start with the first part. What is genuinely wrong with Paul Oyewale? He has an Achilles issue. It's the same issue that Christian McCaffrey is currently suffering from. It is Achilles tendonitis. It is not a linear recovery most of the time. And we've witnessed that with Paul, where even in the fall camp, he would dress out some days and go through some of the individual walkthrough stuff. Other days he'd be in the red jersey with the bike, just Tour de France in it, right? And so that's what's genuinely wrong with Paul. He's got an Achilles issue that is a challenge to overcome, and they're not going to roll him back out there before he's ready. If he's going to miss most of the season, has the staff considered a medical redshirt? My assumption, having not asked anybody, is yes. Because why wouldn't you? He hasn't played this year. Why would you just sacrifice a year of his eligibility? I don't know that we're quite there yet. But, I mean, we're 5 games in, almost 6 games in. He's not going to play on Friday. So we might be getting close to that time to ask that question, for sure. Swizzle714 asks, how much SMU bias is there at DCTF? That's Dave Campbell's Texas Football, a little or a lot. Oh, I should have read some of these before. Swizzle, here's the deal. I don't think that they show a ton of bias towards any school. But what I do think is that they do a great job of covering the schools where they have good relationships. And that's not to say that they don't have good relationship at TCU, because I think Mike Craven has a great relationship with TCU. Carter Yates has a great relationship with the folks here at TCU. But the reality is that TCU is a 5-7 football team that was not good last year and started the season 2-2. And SMU is in their first year in a Power 4 conference. They're 4-1 now. They just beat the brakes off Florida State. They beat the brakes off TCU a couple weeks ago. And yeah, they're going to get more coverage. They're winning. Dave Campbell's Texas Football is no different than any other website that sells subscriptions. That's why the most written about teams on the website are probably Texas and Texas A&M, right? It's just how the business goes. I don't think it's necessarily a bias to cover winning programs more. Like if TCU, go back and look at 2022. They had multiple people at every TCU football game. They were cranking out stories about TCU. It is natural for websites that have a large umbrella, that cover a lot of ground, to gravitate towards success. And I think that's not an indictment of bias. That's just a good business plan, And yeah, I can understand TCU fans' frustration because they want to see quote unquote fair and balanced coverage from outside media. I don't think that the folks over at Dave Campbell's Texas Football have said anything out of pocket about TCU. I think they've been critical for the past year plus, and there's been a lot of reason to be critical the past year plus. They were also full of praise when TCU was winning every football game and going to the national championship. So I think it's more about just the business model than it is, biased towards a singular university, specific school. Mantico says, Dalen Wright, Paul O, Trey Sanders, discuss. Already talked about Paul Oyewale. Dalen Wright has dressed out. I was on the field at Arrowhead on Saturday. He was in full pads with the helmet on, stretching, doing all those things. Healthy scratch. That's what I'm calling him at this point, is a healthy scratch. If you know hockey, you know what I'm talking about. Trey Sanders, I'm surprised like y'all. I thought he would have gotten more snaps by now, especially with the way the running game has struggled. Especially with the way Dominique Johnson has struggled. I thought we would see more Trey Sanders at this point. I don't think he's hurt. And he did look really good in the fall, but as we know now, the running success that people reported on, myself included, Jeremy Clark included, Melissa Treebwasser included, the running game we reported on was a mirage, if you will, because of how bad the run defense has been. Manticos also asks, other than the obvious player rotation, what else changed schematically to get TCU the win at Arrowhead against Kansas? Did the D simplify the playbook? Was the learning too steep? Also, it pains me to see Payne not get his play-in time. All right, so let's start with what changed schematically. Not a ton. Not a ton changed schematically, but to the second question, they did simplify the playbook. Johnny Hodges said that after the game, they simplified. They wanted to play a little faster. They were in their base a little bit more. And I think what that helped them do was stay more disciplined. I was on a Houston podcast this week as well, and one of the things I talked about there was when you have, I think, and this is opinion, when you have a group of guys who have mostly transferred in from other places, and you're combining that group with a group of guys who has a bad taste in their mouth from 2023, your room is full of dudes that want to make an impact, that want to show up on film, that want to make big plays. And sometimes making the right play is vastly different than making the big play. When you make the right play, maybe you're just filling a gap and taking on a blocker. Maybe you're keeping your outside arm free on the edge to seal the edge while someone else crashes down and makes the tackle. When you make the big play, sometimes you find yourself out of position. Sometimes you find yourself caught off guard when a counter play happens or a play action happens. And I think what we saw from TCU over the first 4.5 weeks, I think the second half was really solid defense, but the first 4.5 weeks of the season was a lot of guys trying to make the big play instead of the right play. And they weren't gap sound in the run game. That much is abundantly clear. There were some struggles in the secondary as well. on obvious passing situations, especially that fourth quarter against UCF. And I think that the more comfortable they get in this system and the more they understand that they're just one of 11, the better the defense will continue to get. Andy Avalos being on the sideline, in my opinion, is going to make a huge difference because of how hands-on he likes to be as a football coach. You saw him during the fall, every indie drill, every one-on-one drill, even during team sessions, he's out there with his hands on somebody, showing them the right technique, getting them to the right spot, talking them through, what your thoughts are on this play, where you're supposed to be, what you're reading, what you're looking at, what's your footwork, all of these different things. It's impossible to do that from the booth. You can hop on the phone and holler at a kid, but it's not going to have the same impact as you being on the sideline, hands-on coaching. And that's the kind of coach he is. I was a little confused, I'll be honest, when I saw him in the booth in week 1. And I think moving to the sideline is going to remedy a lot of the issues we've been seeing from the defensive side of the football so far this year. And to the last part there, Manticos, Jeremy Payne is absolutely going to get his playing time. Sonny Dykes said so on Tuesday. He said we're going to see more snaps from Payne against Houston, and if he continues to do well and have success with a bigger workload, then he's going to keep seeing a bigger workload. Super excited for him. He's grown a ton since he got on campus in August. Really excited to see him continue to play well. More Frogs, TCU. Any chance of an update on the status of Buckles as the cornerback's coach? He is still listed on the Go Frogs roster. He is still listed on the Go Frogs roster. If y'all forget, a couple weeks before the Stanford game, Carlton Buckles left for personal reasons. I'll be honest, I saw him on the sideline at Houston, and then I didn't see him on the sideline against Kansas. So I don't know exactly what's going on there. I don't know if he's kind of like checking in, checking out. I don't know. All I'm going to tell you is he left for personal reasons. I don't know what those personal reasons are. I saw him at the SMU game. I didn't see him at Kansas. That's all I'm saying. And truly, that's all the update I've got for you. If I had more, I'd tell you, but I don't. That's all I've got. TCU Frogs 09. What did the offensive line do different schematically against Kansas to open up lanes for the running backs? Well, we saw two things from the offensive line from a personnel standpoint that I think made a big difference. First, Ben Taylor Whitfield got the start at right tackle. He was physical. He was strong. He still made some mistakes, but I thought he played overall really well. We are also starting to see the snap gap, close between Carson Bruno and Remington Strickland. Bruno still got the start on Saturday. I don't know how much longer that's going to be the case because, to me, eyeball test, Remington Strickland had the better day at right guard. Yes, he had a critical false start on 3rd and 1 from the 1-yard line against UCF. TCU probably scores a touchdown if he doesn't do that. Since that point, Remington Strickland has played some pretty good football. And I think that side of the line, that right side of the offensive line, did a much better job blocking up the run. The left side did as well. James Brockermeyer had one of his best days of the season so far. And this is what I talked about a couple of weeks ago, was sometimes it just takes time for linemen to gel and to understand where each other are going to be. How can I trust you to be where you're going to be when you need to be there? All these things take time. A lot of these guys came from other schools. This is why it's not necessarily advisable to try and build an offensive line through the transfer portal. But maybe, just maybe, Saturday was a step in the right direction for the offensive line from an execution standpoint, from a trust standpoint. Maybe the coaching staff figured out a little bit more about personnel to get things headed in the right direction. I think that's all good. Now, if we don't see continued improvement against Houston, back to the drawing board. Let's ask some more of those questions. Task Force Frog. What 2025 positions and contributors aren't on the team right now that TCU will need to go get in the portal? This is a good question. And I'm going to take this time to do a little internet research because I want to see how many linebackers are graduating. Because when I think about this team, I think about the linebackers. The depth is great this year. as I stare at gofrogs.com as it struggles to load. Fix your website, TCU. Come on now. Killing me. Absolutely killing me. I think it's pretty senior laden from what I recall off the top of my head. Let's see. Grid, go, position, click it. Sort by position. Thank you. Scrolling. Still scrolling. Linebackers. Shad Banks, senior. Namdi Obiazor, senior. Marcel Brooks, senior. Cooper McDonald, senior. Okay, so you got a lot of seniors there. Hang on a second. Where is Johnny Hodges? Is he listed as a D lineman? Hang on a second. What's going on here? I don't see a name on here. 57. There he is. Oh, he's a junior. Johnny Hodges is only a junior. Oh my God. He's like 100 years old. Okay. It's like, what are you talking about? Where is the senior? So, all the guys that are seniors. Namdi Obiazor, Shad Banks, Marcel Brooks. Get out of the way. Pronunciation guide. Oh God, I hate this website. Cooper McDonald is a senior as well. So that's 4 of your main linebackers. I know Cooper's a stud. That are seniors. Johnny is a junior somehow. You've got, let's see, who else is behind him? Devin Deal is a junior. Terrence Cooks is a junior. I would say Max Carroll, Kylan Salter. I would say maybe going and getting another linebacker would be good. I would say interior defensive line is going to be a big key for this team moving forward, although they do have some really young bodies that I think can step in when they're healthy. But you're going to need more besides, I mean, Tymon Mitchell, Caleb Fox, and Hakeem Ajijalaya are all seniors, and that's 3 of your 4 rotations. So D tackle, 3 tech, that's going to be a big one as well. And then corner, right? Go get some extra corners so you don't find yourself in the position you're in again next year. So those are the 3. Linebacker, interior D-line, and cornerback, I think, are the big 3 tasks. Annoying group of 20. He says, in the pregame radio last week, Landry Burdine was about to come through the speaker on the lack of leadership on the field. Part A. He mentioned that this team has some guys that have gotten in trouble this year. Aside from the Northside Whataburger, should we read into the lack of playing time? I don't think so. I don't know what Landry knows. I'll tell you that. But it's not the craziest theory to say that lack of playing time is due to off the field issues. I'll say I don't know who that would be at this point. I can do some digging. But that's a really interesting question, Annoying. I'm not sure. Part B, Landry talked about there isn't someone with a calming influence. Even if that's Hoover, someone on staff needs to situationally help him calm down. Bad interception before the half, etc. What are your thoughts? See, this is where it's got to be Sonny, right? Sonny has to be the calming influence. You've got to be the stable boat, right? You've got to be the thing that doesn't rock in the storm. They haven't seen that all the time from Sonny Dykes. So my interpretation of that is, if there isn't someone with a calming influence, someone who can right the ship when things are going wrong, someone who can help people still see the big picture when they're, in the third quarter sweating and bleeding, then what is your head coach doing? Because position coaches are going through it with the players. Coordinators are game planning and adjusting and trying to make tweaks on the fly. It's got to be the head man. Or at TCU, a guy who we hear a lot about in the offseason is Kaz Kazadi, the strength and conditioning coach. He doesn't necessarily have the personality to be that calming influence. So I, again, circle back around to Sonny Dykes. Hey, if you need a calming influence on your team and you don't have one, hello, head coach. What's up? Be that. Sonny wasn't that against SMU. We saw the results. Sonny was that far more against Kansas, and we saw the results. 10 fewer penalties and a win, and he didn't get tossed. I think the calming influence has to be the head coach. You've got to be even keel. You can't let bad calls nag at you for too long. You can't let the high moments keep you high for too long. You have to be level-headed as a head coach, and that includes being a calming influence. Annoying Group of 20 also says, rebuttal, did we show enough in the KU game to turn it around? Bad teams commit penalties. Still some really unacceptable situational penalties. Yeah, JT Broughton's had a couple bad games in a row. I still think he's pretty talented. I think he bounces back. But like I just mentioned, they had 10 fewer penalties against Kansas than they did against SMU. And to me, that shows a marked improvement. That shows they were serious about talking about discipline. That shows they were serious about taking accountability. And all we can do is get another data point on Friday night against Houston to see if they're continuing to improve or if they regress. Go Frogs 08. Should Lance Leipold seek medical help if his face stays that red? Absolutely, because I thought he was going to literally explode. He was so mad. I'll tell you this. I don't know how he didn't get tossed, because he was much more demonstrative than Sonny Dykes was the week before. He said some crazy stuff in the postgame, too. He's for sure getting fined this week. Paul in says, what's your go-to snack at Buc-ee's? It's the same as my go-to snack anywhere, brother. Gardettos and a water. Because I'm an old man. I will sometimes get a breakfast croissant from Buc-ee's if I'm feeling it. But the reality is I'm a Gardettos guy. I'm an almonds guy. A big bottle of Smart Water, baby. Let's hit the road. I don't know. I think Jeremy talked about it on his podcast last week. But we did do the 15-hour drive round trip to Arrowhead and back all on Saturday. He offered to drive. I drove the whole way because I'm a control freak like that. But it was just almonds and a water. And let's get there. I'm not in the car trying to take the scenic route, you know. I'm in the car to get somewhere. TRF51 says, really curious if Shad Banks is going to play this year. I understand he had a concussion week 1, but we're halfway through the year. Hope he is okay. Yeah, he's just not cleared yet. Sometimes, you know, everybody's different when it comes to concussions. Everybody's different when it comes to head injuries, and you know, he's still he's working through it. I've seen him. He looks like he's in a good mood and stuff. I just, you know, not ready for football yet. TCU Ball 3 says, defensive pre-snap positioning seems odd. Opposing teams seem to exploit the A-gap over and over, and the Frogs don't seem to change in order to defend it. Is this a flaw in defensive design or a personnel problem? So this is interesting, and I think someone later in this thread might answer this question. But when you play, so yes, there are a couple times where it does seem like the interior defensive linemen are too far outside the A gap. There are definitely moments of that. I think that's part of where, if that's an alignment issue, if that's a mistake, Avalos being on the sideline will help fix that. There are other moments, though, where, say, Cooper McDonald is playing about 1.5 yards off the line of scrimmage and outside of the tackle. And that's strategic because it gives you a hair more time to see what the blocking scheme is and work your way around it as a guy who's typically single-minded, single-focused on getting to the quarterback. So some of it is defensive design. Some of it is probably user error by the interior linemen. We'll see how they fix things up against Houston. Wrist explosion. Oh, I kind of answered your question there, Wrist. Why does our D-line line up 1 to 1.5 yards away from the ball line of scrimmage? It's a strategic thing. Any progress on an FTC whiskey or bourbon? Maybe. TBD. Hyperfrog. What is the seriousness of Paul's Achilles injury? Kind of talked about that already. From the Frogcast, it sounds like he isn't participating in team practices. Is it safe to assume that he won't play a snap for us this year? Or do you think there's a legitimate chance he plays? Yeah, the longer we go without seeing him, the less likely it is. I think a medical redshirt is probably on the table at this point. And, you know, just research Achilles tendonitis. It's not great. It's not great, and we're already almost halfway through the year. Frog says, ooh, I might need to blow my nose here in a second. Frog says, your coaching wish is granted. You alone get to decide the decide the offensive snap counts for the offense for the foreseeable future. Assume tightly contested conference games, no garbage snaps, no injuries, and with 72 offensive snaps available as per recent trend. Lay out your starters and ideal snap count for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and offensive line. Oh, God, we're going to be here all night. Comment when and why you are deviating and making adjustments to more or less of whom we've seen so far. Feel free to opine generally on the defensive snaps as well with who you'd like to see more or less of. Okay, so this is... You sound like my assignment editor. Okay, Frog, here we go. Josh Hoover, 100% of the snaps. There we go. The deviation is away from Haas Haney. We saw a mental error from him against Kansas, running out of bounds late. Can't have it. Josh Hoover, 100% of the snaps. Running back, I would split carries 50-50, Cam Cook and Jeremy Payne. Look to the fourth quarter of the Kansas game as to why. Wide receivers, I think I would keep it where it is because it's working really well, and why mess with it while it's working? Tight end, well, you lost Chase Curtis for a long time, maybe the whole year, so you're going to see a lot more Drake Dabney, a lot more DJ Rogers. I wrote about this in the snap count. Oh, maybe I don't. I think this is something that I omitted from the snap count because it was getting kind of long. DJ Rogers should be in on passing downs, and Drake Dabney should be in on rushing downs from a blocking perspective. Their PFF grades are exactly opposite when it comes to that. But that might be too much of a tell if you do it that way. Defensively, I think more Channing Canada would be good. Less exposure for every cornerback is good. Less exposure for safeties is good as well. So if that means you see a little bit more Jace Oliver and Richard Toney, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. When Cam Smith is back, I don't think that would necessarily be a bad thing either. I like the move that they made this week to start Marcus Steele. I think that the more he plays, the better. I think the more Hakeem plays, the better. But you also have to be sensitive to stamina. And there's a reason that you rotated positions like that. So you're never going to fully move away from a single person because that's just not how that works. I'd like to see a little bit more of a rotation at linebacker. I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. Keep guys healthy, especially when you've got a guy who's banged up in Nnamdi Obiezor at this point. Prime Beef asks, will Avalos be on the sidelines the rest of the season and not in the box? I asked Sonny Dykes this question on Tuesday, and he said yes. As long as it works, that's where Avalos will be, is on the sideline. Prime Beef also asks, can somebody get ADJD to make putting the frog on the helmet mandatory for the rest of the season? I think that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, Prime, because they're 3-0 with the frog and 0-2 without it. That looks like it will do it for all of our questions. Awesome. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Frogs Insider. We will be back on Sunday. Melissa will not be here because she is out of town. We have a potential special guest co-host that will be joining me on the show. I need to double confirm. But until then, we'll talk to you next time. Go Frogs.